Street harassment was the precise phrase Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez utilized for 8 years to evade sitting in this chair, to evade sitting opposite from Ben Shapiro, and to evade addressing a simple yes or no inquiry. Tonight, she finally ran out of space to conceal herself, and within the initial 90 seconds, 8 million viewers comprehended exactly why she had hidden for nearly a decade. It was not because Shapiro is exceptionally cruel, nor because he acts as a tyrant. Rather, it is because Shapiro strictly demands a yes or no. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the comeback royalty with 9.6 million followers, the politician who has never surrendered a single phrase on broadcast television, cannot provide a yes or a no, because yes immediately leads to the subsequent inquiry, no directly leads to the subsequent inquiry. And that unbroken sequence of questions inevitably leads back to the exact location she spent 8 years fleeing. Tonight she arrived, and she likely wished she could have run for 8 additional years. The debate platform featured 2 seats, 2 microphones, and 8 years of unresolved history lingering between them. The invitation was brokered through CNN, pitched as a special broadcast regarding the future of progressive governance, which was framed vaguely enough so that AOC's staff could agree without conceding they were finally doing the one thing she had refused to do for nearly a decade. Yet, every individual in America who monitors politics recognized exactly what this event represented. This was the ultimate confrontation. She arrived seemingly prepared, armed with 3 days of intense preparation, alongside a team that had analyzed every single one of Shapiro's rapid-fire techniques and rhetorical traps. Their strategy was simple: do not play his game, refuse to answer binary questions, stretch every single response into a lengthy paragraph, manipulate the clock, and ensure it remains a casual conversation rather than a cross-examination. That strategy survived for roughly 4 minutes. AOC commenced the exact way she initiates everything, utilizing standing energy, projecting moral clarity, and maintaining the rhythmic cadence of a politician who has spent 7 years mastering how to make a standard committee room feel exactly like a campaign rally. She spoke passionately about wealth inequality, about affordable housing, and about the working-class families residing in her district who genuinely deserve better. She deliberately refused to look at Shapiro. Instead, she stared directly at the camera, because the camera serves as her true audience, the audience serves as her primary weapon, and that weapon had never previously failed her. Then she pivoted toward him with a slight chin tilt. I want to address the elephant in the room. Mr. Shapiro has been demanding this debate with me since 2018. He offered $10,000. I declined, and I equated his persistent requests to street harassment. I stand firmly by that assessment, because when a man aggressively demands your time and feels entirely entitled to your response, the terminology for that behavior has not fundamentally changed. The studio gallery applauded enthusiastically. The street harassment narrative was successfully deployed, thoroughly tested, completely viral ready, and remained the exact maneuver that had protected her for 8 years. Shapiro did not flinch whatsoever. He appeared as a man who had just been handed precisely the exact opening he required. The Congresswoman states, "I am not entitled to her time," and she is correct, but her 720,000 constituents certainly are. They compensate her with $174,000 annually. This is not street harassment. This is the United States Congress, and within Congress, direct questions require direct answers. So let us proceed to those answers. He did not pause for a moment. He shifted immediately into the initial inquiry because Ben Shapiro simply does not utilize pauses. Pauses are the spaces where opponents' rhetoric thrives. Shapiro occupies every single silence with his subsequent sentence, and that subsequent sentence is consistently a question, and that question is always strictly binary. You introduced the Green New Deal back in 2019. Exactly how much does it cost AOC's response was the exact counter-argument her staff had meticulously rehearsed. The Green New Deal serves as a broad framework for future investment, not a specific line-item budget. Therefore, asking how much does it cost is fundamentally the incorrect question. How much does it cost? Shapiro repeated. He used the exact same inquiry, utilizing the exact same phrasing. He completely ignored Pillay asking the query again as if she had remained entirely silent, primarily because she had supplied a dense paragraph when a specific numerical value was demanded, and a paragraph simply is not a number. The American Action Forum calculated an estimated $93 trillion over a 10-year span. You introduced a legislative resolution carrying a potential price tag of $93 trillion, yet you completely failed to include a formal cost estimate, you omitted any funding mechanism, and you lacked an implementation timeline. In absolutely any other professional industry, proposing a $93 trillion initiative without a basic cost estimate constitutes severe malpractice. In Congress, it merely serves as a press conference, and it prompts a question that I guarantee the GAO currently should be investigating. Can a sitting member of Congress introduce sweeping legislation carrying a $93 trillion economic impact without conducting any fiscal analysis? Because in the corporate private sector, that document gets instantly rejected. In Congress, it just generates Instagram followers. He advanced to the subsequent question long before she could formulate a rebuttal. Each query functioned as a rhythmic beat. Each non-answer functioned as a brief rest, and those rests were aggressively shortening. In 2019, you stated on record, quote, "The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change." That was 7 years ago. Are we currently 5 years away from the total end of the world? That was clearly a rhetorical device, she countered. So the declaration was factually false. When you originally made it, you deliberately utilized a false declaration to rationalize the most aggressively expensive policy proposal in the entire history of Congress, a proposal where you cannot even identify the total cost, and you systematically utilized that false declaration within your fundraising materials. Your political campaign distributed emails referencing that exact 1-2 year deadline, and donors contributed capital because they genuinely believed the world was concluding. The world was not concluding. You fundamentally knew it was not concluding, and yet you solicited capital based upon it. There is a specific legal term for soliciting capital on a premise you explicitly know is false, Congresswoman. Within campaign finance statutes, it is defined as material misrepresentation. That specific sentence resonated far differently than Shapiro's typical rapid-fire cadence because the statement was not merely a debate tactic, it was a formal legal classification. Material misrepresentation is the precise phrasing the FEC employs when financial donors are deliberately deceived. And Shapiro, who acts neither as a prosecutor nor a congressman, but rather as a Harvard Law alumnus who scrutinizes legal statutes the way average individuals review sports scores, had successfully constructed a rigid legal framework around a standard political debate. That legal framework instantly altered the room's temperature, and the entire gallery undeniably felt it. You have formally introduced 42 distinct bills throughout your 7 years. Exactly how many successfully became enacted law? 3 seconds of total silence passed. 0. You were compensated $1.2 million specifically to legislate. You have fundamentally failed to legislate, and the specific bills you actually did introduce, the ones that ultimately went absolutely nowhere, were aggressively utilized in fundraising emails as definitive evidence of your political battle. You actively raised capital on legislation you inherently knew would never pass. Is that considered fighting? Or is that simply marketing? Because the FEC holds very specific opinions regarding that distinction. The second sequence of questions drew significant blood, and it struck a specific vein that carried a direct statute number attached to it. You stated on video recording multiple times, capitalism is irredeemable. That is a direct quotation. Do you stand by that statement? I stand firmly by the overarching critique of an economic system that produces yes or no. Is capitalism structurally irredeemable in its current iteration? Yes or no? The live gallery observed a politician actively attempting to transform a locked door into an open hallway. The inquiry possessed exactly 2 exits, and she was desperately searching for a third. There simply was no third exit. There was only yes, which indicates she entirely opposes the foundational system her own constituents rely upon to survive, and no, which indicates she has been publicly stating something she fundamentally does not believe for 7 years, while simultaneously raising capital on that premise. I will logically interpret that as a yes. Now, your political campaign solicited $15.4 million during the initial half of 2025 utilizing ActBlue. ActBlue operates as a private, for-profit technology platform that handles financial donations and extracts a specific percentage fee. That represents a fundamentally capitalist transaction. Your official campaign merchandise store retails Tax the Rich apparel for $58. That represents a fundamentally capitalist transaction. You secured $15.4 million utilizing the exact economic system you publicly label as irredeemable. And here is precisely where it ceases being a simple debate point and transforms into a rigid compliance inquiry. Your outgoing fundraising emails assure donors you are actively battling capitalism. Your financial donors contribute capital because they genuinely believe you are battling capitalism. You are actively utilizing capitalism to battle capitalism. And your grassroots donors who are contributing $10 and $25 because they genuinely think they are financing a political revolution are actually financing a political campaign that expends $221,000 on private charter jets and $53,500 on luxury hotel accommodations. When your donor solicitation pitch promises to fight capitalism, yet your formal expenditure report highlights 4-star luxury hotels, the FEC officially labels that a direct discrepancy between financial solicitation and actual use. And these discrepancies carry severe consequences. I want to share a story about a citizen named Danny Molina. Danny operates an independent auto repair garage in East Elmhurst, Queens, located directly inside the Congresswoman's voting district. He is 28 years old. He earns $47,000 annually. Danny operates as a capitalist, not because he studied Milton Friedman, but rather because he repairs vehicles, requests financial compensation for his labor, and utilizes that compensation to nourish his family. The Congresswoman explicitly labels that irredeemable. Danny simply labels it a standard Tuesday, and Danny appropriately files his FEC equivalent, his annual tax return, perfectly every single year. Every single line is correct. Every single number is correct. Can the esteemed Congresswoman truthfully claim the exact same standard? The third sequence focused heavily on criminal activity, and this third sequence was the specific one that shattered her entire defense because it directly connected what she publicly stated to what she legally filed, proving they were unequivocally different. In June 2020, you published a tweet expressing support for defunding the police forces. Did you publish that tweet? I publicly supported reallocating municipal resources toward community-based initiatives. Did you publish a tweet in explicit support of defunding the police forces? Yes or no? The tweet explicitly stated defund. That was your specific word on your specific tweet on your specific account in June 2020. Do you still stand by it? AOC abruptly stood up from her chair because standing up is the precise action she utilizes when she requires the entire room to feel her presence. Remaining seated equates to a casual conversation, standing up equates to a commanding speech, and she desperately needed a commanding speech because the binary constraints were suffocating her. Much in the same way a constrained room suffocates an individual who requires physical space to maneuver. Let me be absolutely clear. I have consistently advocated for holistic community safety. The specific framing of defund functioned as a broader movement phrase that ultimately represented a comprehensive call for fundamentally reimagining public safety. Criminal activity within your specific district has surged by 70% since 2019. Did you actively know that specific statistic? She did not respond. She failed to answer strictly because she did not actually know the numerical figure, and failing to know the escalating crime rate within your own geographical district, especially after actively tweeting support for defunding local police within that exact district, is the specific type of ignorance that does not require a clever comeback. It requires a factual number, and she completely lacked one. 70%, sourced directly from the FBI Uniform Crime Report covering your specific district since you initially assumed office. And now, this is the specific element that legally matters. Your February 2025 published newsletter delivered to your constituents stated, and I am quoting directly, "Our community is safer today because of the investments we've championed." Your constituent newsletter literally printed safer. Meanwhile, the official FBI data confirms crime is up 70%. Your constituent newsletter is distributed directly to financial donors. Donors contribute capital heavily based upon what you explicitly communicate to them. You explicitly inform them the local community is safer. It is factually not safer. It is statistically 70% less safe. That is not merely a subjective political disagreement. That represents a demonstrably false declaration contained within a donor-facing communication, and the FEC enforces strict regulations regarding that exact behavior. The studio room fell completely quiet. It was not the expectant quiet of a room anticipating a clever rebuttal. It was the stunned quiet of a room that had just witnessed a podcast host possessing a Harvard Law credential seamlessly connect a social media tweet to a constituent newsletter, to a statistical crime metric, and finally to a rigid FEC regulation in exactly 90 seconds. Suddenly realizing that this sequential connection was not a logical stretch whatsoever, it was a perfectly straight line. Shapiro had successfully drawn it, and straight lines, once publicly drawn on live broadcast television, simply do not erase. AOC aggressively fought back. She fought back utilizing the exact method she consistently employs, using fire, using deep passion, and utilizing the full-body intensity of a politician who has successfully survived every single political attack for 7 years by consistently being louder, faster, and substantially more emotionally authentic than any other individual in the space. You want specific numbers. Here are some numbers. 40 million American citizens lack basic health insurance. Where exactly is your comprehensive plan? 600,000 American citizens remain unhoused. Where exactly is your proposed bill? You sit arrogantly there demanding yes or no as if you are the presiding judge, but you are absolutely not a judge. You are merely a podcast host. You have never been elected to any office. You have never authored a single piece of legislation. You have never physically knocked on a voter's door. Do not you dare attempt to reduce my comprehensive life's work to a simple yes or no. The studio gallery completely erupted. A massive standing ovation cascaded from her dedicated section, and the overwhelming sound saturated the room exactly the way her booming voice always saturates rooms. Shapiro simply waited for 3 full seconds, which represents his personal version of deep patience. The Honorable Congresswoman just accurately stated, "I haven't authored a single law. She's entirely correct. I am not serving in Congress." She currently is, and throughout 7 long years, she has successfully authored exactly 0. I am merely a podcast host. She's entirely correct regarding that fact as well. However, the podcaster just educated the sitting lawmaker regarding the exact crime rate inside her own voting district, and the lawmaker was completely ignorant of it. She demands I don't reduce her work to yes or no. However, yes or no absolutely is not a reduction. It functions as a basic competency test. Did you successfully pass the specific laws you publicly promised? Yes or no? Do you accurately know the statistical data in your own voting district? Yes or no? Did your official newsletter assure donors the community is significantly safer when local crime has actually surged 70%? Yes or no? These inquiries are not deceptive tricks. These represent the absolute minimum standard. And unfortunately, that minimum standard is significantly more than the Congresswoman can currently provide. Danny Molina accurately files his business taxes every single year. He comprehensively knows his total revenue down to the exact penny. Danny effectively manages a 2-bay repair shop and can confidently recite every single metric within his small business. The esteemed Congresswoman operates a massive congressional office boasting a $174,000 annual salary alongside a $15 million campaign war chest, yet she cannot even recite the local crime rate within her own district, nor the basic cost of her own signature legislation. Furthermore, her formal newsletter, the exact one donors read prior to donating capital, publishes statements that the FBI's empirical data directly contradicts. Danny would be instantly audited. Danny would be severely fined. The Congresswoman is currently running for federal re-election. The broadcast moderator promptly signaled for final closing statements. Shapiro proceeded first. He deliberately did not recount the logical chains. Instead, he declared one specific point. The Congresswoman labeled this debate street harassment for 8 long years. Tonight, we ultimately discovered exactly why. It is not because I act as a bully. It is because I demand a yes or a no. And yes or no represents the absolute singular format where millions of Instagram followers offer zero assistance, where clever clapbacks entirely fail, and where the most incredibly viral Congresswoman in all of America is forced to answer a direct query using a concrete fact rather than a subjective feeling. However, tonight was not merely a contest regarding feelings versus facts. Tonight was fundamentally about official records, federal financial records. Her constituent newsletter assured donors the local community is safer, while the FBI confirms crime has surged 70%. Her ongoing fundraising emails referenced a 1-2-year climate deadline she explicitly knew was logically false. Her official campaign documentation listed $221,000 in private charter jet expenditures, while she explicitly assured grassroots donors she travels commercial. Every single one of those examples represents a massive discrepancy between what she promised donors and what the federal financial records actually prove. And the FEC, not myself, but the FEC holds the statutory authority to thoroughly examine whether those specific discrepancies officially constitute material misrepresentation toward donors. I am merely a podcaster. She is entirely correct. I cannot officially launch a federal investigation. However, 8 million viewers just witnessed these glaring discrepancies on live broadcast television, and 8 million distinct witnesses are significantly harder to dismiss than a singular podcaster holding a microphone. AOC's concluding statement lasted 3 full minutes. She exceeded her allotted time. She passionately spoke regarding the Bronx, regarding her hardworking mother, and regarding possessing the internal courage to remain standing when society demands you sit down. It was undeniably a powerful speech, a classic AOC speech, the specific kind that successfully packs massive arenas, that actively makes audiences cry and that effectively transforms random strangers into recurring donors. Yet tonight, following 90 grueling minutes of basic yes or no inquiries she ultimately could not answer, following the exposed newsletter, following the surging crime rate, following the debunked 1-2-year deadline, and following the private jet expenses explicitly listed on federal FEC filings she previously claimed did not exist, the grand speech resonated entirely differently. It sounded exactly like the specific concept Shapiro had initially labeled it. It sounded like a subjective feeling positioned exactly where a concrete fact should logically be. It sounded like a beautiful, poetic paragraph placed exactly where a hard number should logically be. And it sounded like a deflection where a simple yes or a simple no was the absolute only thing the entire room required to hear. She ultimately received the standing ovation. She consistently receives the standing ovation. But a standing ovation and a federal financial filing represent two completely different realities. And tonight, the federal filing undeniably emerged victorious. Here is the fundamental reality concerning this broadcast debate. Shapiro remains merely a podcaster. He wields absolutely zero subpoena authority. He holds no formal committee jurisdiction, and he commands no systemic institutional leverage. However, what he successfully accomplished on live broadcast cameras in front of 8 million eager viewers was strategically construct a permanent record, not necessarily a formal legal record, but rather a devastating evidentiary one. Every single contradiction AOC uttered on live camera was instantly time-stamped, digitally recorded, and heavily cross-referenced alongside the exact federal financial filings it directly contradicted. And permanent evidentiary records, once they officially exist, inevitably attract the specific bureaucratic institutions that actually do possess subpoena authority. Two specific video clips achieved massive virality, but they ultimately circulated to completely different online spaces and inflicted entirely different types of damage. The primary clip involved professional competence. Shapiro interrogating the total cost of the Green New Deal, AOC utterly failing to know it, and Shapiro casually citing the $93 trillion estimate. It achieved 31 million total views. This particular clip successfully crossed rigid party boundaries, largely because it was not inherently political. Rather, it was fundamentally professional. The visceral reaction it triggered was the universal reaction experienced by any individual who has ever sat opposite a colleague proposing a massive initiative without actually knowing the underlying price tag, the universal cringe of basic competence, observing pure incompetence. A prominent Bronx Community Board representative uploaded it, accompanied by 4 simple words. She didn't know it. It gathered 800,000 likes. The secondary viral clip featured the newsletter contradiction, AOC's official constituent letter declaring the neighborhood is safer, juxtaposed directly against the FBI's confirmed 70% crime surge. It reached 23 million total views. This specific clip circulated entirely differently. It aggressively traveled throughout campaign finance, compliance forums, across dedicated FEC watchdog accounts, and through the highly specialized network of legal professionals who officially file donor communications for their standard livelihood. The overwhelming consensus established among these compliance professionals was completely unambiguous. Distributing a newsletter that assures donors the neighborhood is substantially safer when official FBI data clearly indicates a 70% crime surge represents, at the very absolute minimum, a material factual discrepancy contained within a donor-facing communication. The specific phrase, material factual discrepancy, acts as the FEC's designated legal terminology for the exact catalyst that legally triggers an official review, and that exact phrase was suddenly attached directly to a digital clip boasting 23 million views. During week 1, the National Legal and Policy Center, the exact same watchdog organization that had previously filed the $18,725 psychiatrist-related complaint back in March 2026 officially submitted a comprehensive supplemental complaint directed to the FEC. This supplemental document formally cited 3 distinct on-camera declarations from the broadcast debate that directly contradicted pre-existing federal financial filings. The claim of flying commercial weighed against $221,000 logged in private charter jet disbursements. The Safer Community newsletter weighed against official FBI local crime metrics. And the capitalism is irredeemable fundraising rhetoric weighed against highly capitalist expenditure patterns. The supplemental filing was highly narrow, incredibly specific, and meticulously time-stamped to the exact debate footage. It functioned in pure effect as a formal legal complaint constructed entirely from evidence the Congresswoman had willingly provided herself on live camera, entirely voluntarily positioned directly in front of 8 million watching witnesses. The FEC formally received the supplemental filing. Simultaneously, the FEC also successfully received 2,300 unique individual citizen complaints within that exact same week, establishing a historic record for any single representative during a filing period. Not all of them were highly serious, nor were all of them legally actionable, but gathering 2,300 distinct complaints targeting the exact same individual within a singular week systematically creates an overwhelming volume that the Commission simply cannot procedurally ignore, primarily because intentionally ignoring that sheer volume inherently functions as a legally reviewable decision. During week 2, the pre-existing NLPC formal complaint, specifically the $18,725 allocated towards psychiatrist payments, deceptively categorized as leadership training, drastically accelerated, not necessarily because new factual evidence emerged regarding the psychiatrist, but strictly because the live debate had firmly established a behavioral pattern. The Congresswoman's federal filings consistently describe occurrences entirely differently than what those occurrences actually represent. Leadership training that functionally serves as psychiatric medical care, commercial airline flights that functionally serve as private charter jets, and a safer community that fundamentally harbors 70% more criminal activity. That behavioral pattern, once made entirely visible, successfully reframed every single previous federal filing as being potentially connected to a significantly larger systemic discrepancy, and systemic patterns are exactly what the FEC officially investigates. Furthermore, the House Office of Congressional Conduct officially received a formal referral originating from a nonpartisan governmental accountability group explicitly requesting a thorough preliminary review regarding the Congresswoman's official constituent communications. The submitted referral specifically cited the Safer Community newsletter and formally questioned whether that specific communication legally constituted a misleading representation of localized district conditions targeted toward donors and constituent. The formal referral was absolutely not a criminal charge. It was merely a question. However, a specific question presented from a nonpartisan organization to an official ethics office, entirely backed by concrete FBI crime metrics and an undeniable debate clip carrying 23 million views, represents the exact type of question that inherently generates a formal investigative file, and formal files, once they are officially opened, inherently tend to expand. During week 3, Danny Molina was officially interviewed by a localized Queens cable broadcast station. Lasting exactly 30 seconds inside his garage, with literal grease staining his hands, he explicitly stated she didn't know how much her own proposed bill costs. I know exactly how much a standard brake job costs. I know exactly how much a basic timing belt costs. I know my monthly rent down to the absolute penny. She completely lacks knowledge regarding her own bill And she explicitly declared, capitalism is irredeemable, but I actively repair vehicles for a living that is literally capitalism. She is publicly calling my daily labor irredeemable, while she simultaneously raises millions of dollars doing the exact same thing. I proudly voted for her back in 2020. I genuinely don't think I will ever do it again. That specific interview clip generated 6 million views. Danny instantly evolved into a powerful symbol, not necessarily of political conservatism, nor of dedicated Shapiro fandom, but rather representing the highly specific, deeply resonant frustration of a hardworking small business operator who intimately knows his financial metrics and whose elected representative completely does not. This immense frustration effortlessly crossed ideological party boundaries strictly because it was not fundamentally ideological. It was entirely professional. A unified coalition comprising 47 independent small business operators located within New York, including 14 distinct auto repair shops, local nail salons, neighborhood bodegas, laundromats, and restaurants officially signed a joint letter delivered directly to the FEC, aggressively requesting a fully public accounting regarding the Congresswoman's internal campaign expenditures. The formal letter explicitly avoided using dense legal terminology. Instead, it utilized the exact language of everyday citizens who are forced to file compliance forms for a basic living. We are legally required to account for every single dollar. We are aggressively audited over minor discrepancies totaling $200. Our elected representative effortlessly raises $15 million and publicly calls our daily labor irredeemable. We would highly like to witness the exact same rigorous standard applied directly to her federal filings that is continuously applied to ours. Those 47 distinct signatures originated directly from her own voting district, coming from the exact constituents who dutifully pay the taxes that actively fund the salary that successfully compensates the political work that has managed to produce exactly 0 laws over the span of 7 years. That joint letter was completely not a standard legal instrument. Rather, it functioned as something significantly more politically dangerous. It functioned as a societal permission slip. It officially granted the FEC the social permission to aggressively act, not prompted by hostile partisans, nor driven by watchdog organizations, but generated directly from everyday constituents, from the precise demographic the Congresswoman vehemently claims she actively represents, and from the many individuals exactly like Danny. She fiercely labeled the prospect of this debate street harassment for 8 consecutive years. Ultimately, it turned out to represent something entirely different. It definitively turned out to be basic yes or no inquiries that she proved she fundamentally could not answer, alongside glaring contradictions she willingly created on live broadcast camera, combined with a formal constituent newsletter that promised they were safer when the official FBI declared they were 70% worse, and finally establishing a rigid pattern of financial discrepancies that presently commanded a formal investigative file located at the FEC, an official ethics referral stationed at the congressional office, 2,300 unique citizen complaints, and a devastating open letter authored by 47 local small business owners who simply desired to understand exactly why their operational standards were significantly higher than hers. The core question remained exactly the specific question it had always fundamentally been, and 8 long years of desperately labeling it street harassment had absolutely not managed to change what it truly was. It remained a simple yes or a simple no, and ultimately, she still did not have one.